Hello everyone, welcome back to another lecture on the course Python Fundamentals, Building Blocks for Aspiring Developers. We will continue with the ninth module that is working with external APIs. So we are on the 34th day of our agenda. Today we will have a look at how we parse JSON data and how we can handle API responses. So let's begin. So first, let's understand what is JSON. So JSON basically stands for JavaScript Object Notation. This format is like a dictionary in Python. It's a very lightweight data exchange format, and this is why it is most commonly used in web APIs. It's very easy to transfer, very easy to read. Um, and it's very lightweight. So this is why almost all of them, 90 to 95% of web services use this JSON. So parsing JSON data involves converting the JSON string like this. It is basically a string, and we saw in the last video the type of data is string. We saw that it looked like a dictionary, but basically it was a string. But we can convert that string into a proper dictionary, and then we can use it as a dictionary, because working with strings is not that efficient. We cannot do much with strings, but we can do quite a lot with dictionaries and lists, as you would have seen in the previous lectures. So Python already has a built-in support for parsing JSON data through the JSON module. Um, we sometimes have to install this module afterwards. It's sometimes not in the Python standard library, but the requests module that we're using, it also provides a function that has JSON function to convert the response into JSON, and we can use that one as well. So how do we handle response? So once we make a request, it is very essential to understand the response and how we can handle it properly. Because if we do not handle it properly, our application or our code can run into lots of problems, errors, and can just break down in between. So this APIs basically have status codes, headers, and response data that we receive after we make a call, and all of these are very essential and help us understand the data, and also handle errors more gracefully. So the status code basically tells us about the result that we get, like if the result is okay, if it is not good, things like that. For example, the common codes that we have is 200, 404, and 500. In the previous video, when we printed the response right away, we saw that it said response 200. So that was a status code, right? So 200, when we get a response 200, that means that it is okay. The request has been made successfully and data has been retrieved successfully. Now, there could be an issue that the data is not what we were expecting, and that is mostly because we might have used the wrong endpoint, or we might have used different sort of query parameters, but the but but the request was successful in getting a response. Now 4044 means that it is not found. That is that the endpoint we are trying to get a response from does not exist. That could be if we made an error, if we had a typo in the URL endpoint, maybe that endpoint was removed, things like that. Sometimes we also get 500, that is internal server error. This mostly occurs if there is some problem with the API endpoint or the service itself. Like we are doing a request, we get a 500. That usually means that the website or the service on which we are sending a request, that itself has a problem and we cannot solve them. They have to solve them themselves, right? And then we have headers. So headers have some additional information about the response, such as content type, some sort of information about the server, these type of things. We usually do not use headers as much, as they don't really have data, but sometimes it can be useful to get some metadata about the data itself. So this is an example. So we can simply check the status code of the response, and if it is good, if it is 200, this basically if conditions allows us to check if we have gotten a proper response. If we haven't gotten a proper response, we can display an error message. So this is why it is very useful. And in the blue circle, you can see that how simply we can convert the data, the response into a JSON format. And JSON is just like a dictionary in Python. And this is how we can access the items in headers. So headers is basically a dictionary as well, and we can just see what things it provides. So let's begin. So we will continue with the previous one over here, right? We have this over here. Previously we were doing response.text, but this time around, let's say we want to see the status code. I save the code. Let me just clear this and I run the code. So it says that status.code is 200. Now let's say if I make a typo over here. So I do this. Now this does not exist, right? This is incorrect. And if I run the code, it says something sort of an error. And we should get a API. So if we do something that is not allowed, we usually get some errors. Yeah, 404. Error over if I put something here in a typo, the error is different because this is the URL of the service and this is basically the API endpoint. So if I have incorrect API endpoint, it says 404, it is not found. Simple as that. Now I can't show you the 500 internal server error because it doesn't really exist. It exists on the side of the service, and usually when it exists, they quickly solve it. So let me just do it. We have this posts, we have just 200. Now we can use this one in an if condition. So what we do is we say if response dot status code is equals to 200, that means everything is correct. And we can simply print response dot text, and if it is not correct, then what we can do is we can print out the error. So we say print, we say, let's say error, and then we can even write some other things over here. For example, we can write the response code or the status code for the user. We can even try and write the error itself. So we can say error information here, and we can say response dot text, right? Now if I run the code, it runs correctly because this condition is true, right? Now if I make an error over here, it should be 404, and it says error is 404, and we don't really have a request text. We don't really have a text from a response. So now the user will know that okay, it is a 404 error, maybe the API is different or there's a problem with the endpoint. Let me just correct it for now. And now instead of getting the JSON data as a text, I want to convert that into JSON. So what I say is data is equals to response.json, right? And then if I say print data, right? And then it says like this. Seems very similar to the previous one, but the data type for this one is not string. We can check it like this, and we can do it like this, and it says it is basically a dictionary. So JSON or dictionary are sort of the same data types. Now, since it is a dictionary, what we can do is we can even parse the different fields. Let me just run it one more time so I can understand. Okay, so we can say print, so we can say user ID, and we can say data dot user ID, right? We can even say print title and this title over here, right? Copy paste it. Just copy paste this one again. And what else I can print? I can print the body over here. So I say this body, right? And I do not need to print this one. And let's run. Let's say it has no attribute user ID. Okay, let me just do it like this. Sometimes it gives an error if we don't do it like this. And here I'm going to say body. Let's see. It says user ID is 1. This is our title and this is our body. Everything's pretty good. We can use the data that we have returned, right? We couldn't do it if we use the text response, right? Now for a moment, let's say we do not want to do this. I will comment this out and we wanted to look at the headers. What information do they provide? So what I would do is I would say for header, and then we have value of that header in response dot headers dot items. So I'm just trying to iterate over a dictionary. I will say print. Let me do header, print header, and let's say print value, and let's say print value, and let's put a backslash n. So there's a difference after each of those. So run the code. So it says there's a lot of information now. So it says header is date, value is this. Then we have header is content type and the value is JSON. Header is encoding and the value is chunked. So this is some information, a lot of information. Most of this is not really required by us. This is more towards the networking part, and this is not really what we deal with in Python when we are making this sort of requests. But still, it is good to know that you can have this sort of information, right? Now, one more thing I want to do is that instead of getting one post, I want to get all of the posts. And let me say print data, run it. So we have a lot of these. So what I can do now is use a um, use a for loop. So I can say for, let's say, user ID and title in data dot items, and here I can say print user ID, and let's say print title, and let's say print backslash n. Okay, so it gives me an error. List object has no attribute. Okay. So once we have more than one data feature, it usually is returned as a list of JSON objects, right? Now, since it is a list, we cannot iterate it over using these dictionaries. So what we have to do, we have to use lists. So what I say is for item and data, right? Or instead, let's say for I in data, and I can say I, and I want to get the user ID of this person or whatever the data is. I, and now I want to get the title of this one. So let's say this over here. And finally, yeah, let's save the code and run it. Okay, it says user ID. So we need to use the correct one. So now we have all of these, right? All of this. Now we if there's some sort of value, you can do an addition, you can subtract it, you can save it in some other database, you can do something else, and then you can use it in your code in any way that you want. So this is how basically you make requests, you handle the responses gracefully, and you look at the status code, and now it should be much more clear why these are useful. And that was all in this lecture. So hopefully by now you would have gotten a better idea of how external APIs work and why and how do we use them and how to make them more efficient in our code. And that will be all in this lecture, and we'll meet you in the next one. Up till then, goodbye.